Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Shoma Mukherjee, Assistant Professor of Comparative Literature from Vishwa-Bharati. I am going to talk about a paper called Reading New Literatures in English. The topic of discussion is called Class, Caste, Gender, Intersections in New Writings in English. And the content writer is Sharoni Roy, Research Fellow, Vishwa-Bharati. The new literature in English is a relatively new area of study. It has been viewed as an offshoot of the historical phenomena of colonialism. Colonialism as a discourse actually aimed not only at coercion but consent building through political and ideological persuasions. Military conquest was only a prologue to what was to become a never-ending process of cultural invasion. Now, if we can talk about the context of New English literature, then we can say that the idea of New English literature is a product of the transnational and transcultural exchange processes and developments that colonialism gave birth to. Issues of literary negotiations of colonization and decolonization, migration and social inequality are central lines of analysis and research in New English literature. The search for a meaningful identity and a local cultural specificity to oppose the cultural assimilation of colonial rule or contemporary globalization is an important theme of new literatures. Now we will deal with the question of language and how actually language interacts with power in the colonial as well as in the neo-colonial geographical as well as ideological areas. During colonialism, English became one of the medium through which linguistic imperialism has been established. So, in the later phase, during nationalist movement, the nationalist leaders tried to reclaim English as the language of resistance. English actually opens up a space through which one can access a global audience. At the same time, it can be termed as a medium through which one can resist the hegemonic discourse of globalization that aims at making a homogeneous group. And during this process, one have to pay attention to the cultural specificities of, say, several minority groups, and the idea of language and its relation to the power in the colonial as well as in the post-colonial world, in post-globalized world, all these things actually challenge the universal categories of human identity. New literatures are strictly critical of the trope of universality inherent in both colonial and anti-colonial discourses. In all these discourses, one assumes that categories can be easily drawn out of hugely complex and multi-layered human experiences. But literature is that particular space through which one can problematize that universal notion about literature, culture, society as well as individual. New literatures take into account the plurality of voices that resonate through the contemporary post-colonial societies. These societies are marked by differences in terms of class, caste and gender. Instead of projecting a facade of unity, these literatures expose the internal divisions ruthlessly. Now, one can study as well as analysis the idea of new literature through the theoretical perspective of intersectionality. New literatures have found the theoretical approach of intersectionality as a very useful or helpful medium in its analysis of the multidimensionality of human experience. The term intersectionality was coined by American feminist academic Kimberly Crenshaw and in an article published in 1989 on violence against women of color in the lower classes in the United States. Intersectionality or intersectionalism is the study of intersections between different groups of minorities, specifically the study of the interaction of multiple systems of oppression or discrimination. Intersectionality holds that the classical conceptualization of oppression within society, such as racism, sexism, homophobia and religion or belief-based bigotry, do not act independently of one another. Instead, these forms of oppression interrelate, creating a system of oppression that reflects the quote-unquote intersection of multiple forms of discrimination. In this module, we shall deal with the following texts and try to understand the intersections of caste, class and gender in these new English writings. The texts are Jean Rhys's White Sargasso Sea, Arundhati Roy's The God of Small Things, Khaled Hosseini's The Kite Runner, Bapsi Sidhwa's Cracking India, Arvind Adiga's The White Tiger, Amitabh Ghosh's Sea of Poppies. Now we will discuss Jean Rhys's White Sargasso Sea, which can be termed as a text which talks about dialectic of the self and the other. Main points of inquiry of White Sargasso Seas are the following. It actually talks about the class conflict. Set in the plantation colony of the Caribbean island, we will encounter three primary classes, three groups of people in the text. The first is the British white master, the colonizer. Second, the white Caribbean plantation and slave owner. And third, the majority people, the black slaves and workers of the plantation. The text actually depicts the relationship between these classes and how they are governed by asymmetries of power. If we look at the context of the text, then we will realize the growing hostility between the former slave owners and the black slave workers after the passage of 1833 Emancipation Act, and how that act actually affects the slave owners as well as the black slaves. The demise of the Jamaican elite, represented by the misfortunes of the heroine, the main character of the text, Antoinette's family, is subjected to. The strained relationship between the family and its servants, who are all the time gossiping. Racial and class animosity becomes obvious when Antoinette is rejected by her childhood friend Tia, the servant's daughter whom she runs to after the attack. One can look at the text and through its several examples, through the analysis of the text, one reader can realize that the servant is not a homogeneous group in the novel. And for a detailed analysis, you can refer back to the main text and look at the example from the text. White Sargasso Sea also talks about the problem of the colored woman and the half-caste child. The constant juxtaposition between the white and the black woman is one of the main themes of the novel. There is even a deeper juxtaposition and hierarchy between English whiteness and the Creole whiteness, that English people who came from the United Kingdom and the people who are the white people who are living in these worlds, and when they produce children through, say, the black slaves, and then the Creole, the mixed blood, they have been created. So the text actually talks about the hierarchy between the pure white race and the impure Creoles. Not only women but men are also held with contempt by the English. The Creole, the men. The English hate the Creole men for being drunkard and lecherous. Antoinette's father is the prototype of this kind, who is known for fathering a number of illegitimate children, having numerous sexual affairs with black women. Rochester leaves Jamaica to avoid moral contamination, and for a detailed analysis again you can refer back to the main text. Now we will talk about Arundhati Roy's The God of Small Things, and how the issues of untouchability, gender, discrimination and consent building are the main themes of Arundhati Roy's novel. The novel, Arundhati Roy's novel, is set in communist Kerala. It deals with the questions about multiple systems of oppression, how oppressive is Indian caste system, how Christianity acts as a oppressive religious system, and how patriarchy as a social system actually oppressed, exploited common people. And in another level, how communist regime in Kerala exploited several loopholes existent in the contemporary society. And the text finally argues how these collaborate to shun the deviant individuality. If one can do a detailed analysis of the God of Small Thing, then they will encounter the various aspects of Indian caste system. The upper caste Syrians, they are Christian. The feudal family that runs a pickle factory are shown to be exploiting the paravans or the untouchables, who are workers of the factory. The family of Velutha traditionally serves this family but is never allowed a front door entry to the house. The paravans are avoided because the masters are repulsed by their peculiar body smell. And for other references, you can again get back to the main text. There are several other issues which actually narrator talks about through different incidents in the novel. The issues are Christianity and its domination over religious space. Conversion to Christianity played a large part in consolidating the British Empire. Christianity came to India with a rhetoric of equality, universal love and social recognition, which so much attracted the Indian Dalits and lower castes. But in reality, the Christian church compromised considerably with the existing Brahminical social structure, and lower castes continued to be oppressed. The Syrian Christians, on the other hand, in fact demand a linkage with the upper caste Brahmins. The God of Small Things talks about several other issues like patriarchy and gender discrimination, and how both caste system and patriarchy are systems sanctioned by religion. These in turn reinforce the traditional forces of religion. In the novel, there is sheer gender discrimination in terms of families' upbringing of the son and the daughter, Chako and Ammu. While Chako is sent to Oxford for studies, Ammu has to run away and marry simply because no one will pay for her marriage. And for further references and textual analysis, you can again refer back to the main text. Arundhati Roy's novel actually set during the communist regime in Kerala. The novel mercilessly lay bare the hypocrisy of the communist regime in Kerala. Instead of working towards a classless society that Marxism promises, it reinforced the traditional class distinction. It collaborates with Hindu casteist politics and does not really question the existing structure. On the other hand, the state machinery, which was in the hands of the leftist party in Kerala at that time, is used to silence the rising proletariat that has been depicted through the character Velutha and the independent woman, that is Ammu. Now we can talk about Khalid Hosseini's The Kite Runner, and how issues such as religious intolerance, cultural illegitimacy and quest for personal integrations are main topic of discussion in this particular novel. As a points of inquiry, we can look at the following issues in Hosseini's novel. the existing hierarchy of ethnic groups set in the cultural historical milieu of the Afghanistan. The novel actually set against the backdrop of the ethnic divide of the Shia and the Sunni Muslims in Afghanistan. The novel problematizes categories of gender identities and reverse power equations. Shia or the Hazaras constitute the minority and are therefore oppressed and exploited by the majority Sunni or the Pashtuns. Kite fighting is a perfect example of this hierarchical caste system. The team of two in the kite fighting competition comprises of the one who shall fly kites and the other whose job is to chase fallen kites. Hassan, who is a Shia, is assigned the latter job, while Amir, being a Pashtun, is entitled for flying kites. Khalid Hosseini's novel actually talks about how the idea and discourses of masculinity has been ruptured. The extreme powerlessness of the Hazaras is represented in the way they are feminized. Their subjugated class and caste status is symbolized through a loss of masculinity. Hassan's father Ali is the servant of Amir's family. He is shown to be important and Hassan is revealed to be Amir's half-brother. Hassan is also raped by an older boy, so is his son Sohrab put to sexual assault repeatedly in the text. Even the ethnic cleansing that happened in Mazar-e-Sharif is one of the ways by which the masculine Pashtuns subjugate the feminized Hazaras and reinforce their dominance. But Hosseini himself challenges these simplest associations when he shows that years later in America, Amir and his wife are suffering from some kind of unexplainable infertility and are unable to conceive a child. The idea of masculinity is interrogated in a dialogical manner in the text. Also, Hosseini has feminized Afghanistan itself by emphasizing values like love, friendship, compassion and forgiveness, while the Taliban and the other forces which ravaged it are the masculine forces trying to gain a control over her. So, you will find several references, detailed analysis in the main text, and you can refer back to the e-text for further references. Khalid Hosseini's The Kite Runner also talks about the role reversals and how a situation has been reversed its position. The America episode of the novel is a critical interrogation of the stereotypical ideas upheld as truth by the elite Afghani culture. Especially it questions the feminine masculine binaries. Now we will go to another novelist, that is Bapsi Shidwa, and her novel Cracking India, and how it actually talks about the fracture of values. Bapsi Shidwa's novel deals with the dynamics of majority-minority identities. Set against the backdrop of the partition of 1947, the novel interrogates the dynamics of majority and minority identities in the making of a new nation and shows how power equations change with time. It starkly contrasts the worlds of pre- and post-partition Lahore and shows how partition challenges the markers of human identity. Prior to the partition, characters are identified by their class position or by the professions they are involved with, that either they are Aya, the nanny, the malishwala or the mashior, and ice candy wala or the seller of the ice candy. But soon after the news of partition spreads, their identities undergoes a radical shift which reduces them to their religious identities, like they are being labeled as either Hindu, Muslim or Sikh or Parsi. Shidwa's choice of a Parsi girl narrator for Cracking India is also important. The Parsis constituted a tiny minority in British India. Leni, because her religion situates her on the periphery, is able to narrate with objectivity, the implication being that someone speaking from the middle would be somewhat biased. In pre-partition time, Parsis happen to be an upper class minority. The Parsis household has been portrayed with obvious signs of affluence. but partition robs them of their class privilege. Some of their own servants turn against them. Bapsi Sidhwa's novel actually talks about parallel between religious and gender violence. The idea is that the partition, which has drawn on the basis of religious majority, left the minority groups in a vulnerable position, so much so that they were almost feminized. So the innocent game of pulling Hari, the Hindu gardener's dhoti, in pre-partition days becomes a potential threat of sexual violence in the later part of the novel. The assault on Hori anticipates Aya's rape in the novel, who is doubly marginalized as she is both Hindu, a religious other in a Muslim-dominated Lahore, and a woman, the gendered other. Religious conversion is never enough for Aya because her Hindutva is marked on her body, unlike Hari, turned Himmat Ali, who can easily prove his conversion by showing a circumcised penis. Sidhwa's novel deals with the idea of intervention of class. Aya is looked upon as the caste other of Leni, whose gaze documents all her movements. For Leni, Aya represents a form of sexuality very distinct from the sexuality of the upper class Parsi women, represented by Leni's mother. The difference of sexual behavior is located in their class distinctions. Finally, the way Ice Candy Man forces Aya to work as a prostitute and earns money before marrying her speaks of a complex involvement of caste, class and gender. Now we will discuss Arvind Adiga's The White Tiger, which can be termed as a novel which talks about the emergence of a new India. In this particular novel, the writer deals with caste as a residual ideology and class as a dominant ideology. The novel deals with 21st century India and the contradictions that rupture the grand narrative of the post-independence, post-colonial modern nation state. It shows how class is becoming the ultimate determining factor of identity in today's India. Either one belongs to the group of the big bellies, corresponds to the Marxist idea of the haves, or to the small bellies or the have-nots. Either you eat or gets eaten up. The novel talks about one India among which live many Indias. The novel depicts the India of high-rise buildings, shopping malls, business and entrepreneurs. But it also talks about that India where group of drifters and homeless men, the part of underclass who seem to have been left out of the story of India's growth. These people who beg for the food, sleep under concrete flyovers, defecate on the roads, they are also the citizens of India and they are part of that many Indias. The India of car owners and also the India of their drivers. The novel deals with all these issues. The novel depicts that how modern and traditional methods of exploitation collaborate with each other and how the powerful becomes more powerful. Here caste continues to play its role even in this fast changing India. Balram's name itself bears his caste. Halwai, or the caste of the traditional sweet makers, is what he belongs to. The feudal zamindari system continues to thrive in rural parts of India, and the feudal lords have shifted to cities, continue to follow casteism. Thus, the Muslim driver has to hide his real identity to secure his job. But Balram's rise from halwai to tea stall worker to driver and finally to an entrepreneur is a story of class upliftment which finally succeeds in fostering a kind of indifference to caste identities. Class, caste and gender continues to conspire to make system like dowry work. To arrange a same caste marriage, dowry is essential. To pay the dowry of Balram's cousin sister's marriage, Balram had to stop going to school, but the loss was compensated in the marriage of Balram's brother. If dowry is the reality of rural India, prostitution governs the urban life of India. Now, if we look at the way novel depicts the prostitutes and the bored housewives, and they become the two facets of patriarchy. Apart from the rural girl married off with dowry and the lower class urban prostitute, the text hints at a third category. The character of Pinky, Balram's master Ashok's wife, is symptomatic of the upper class woman. The stereotypical bored housewife killing her time with makeup and shopping and occasional driving puts a question mark for the discourse of feminism and women empowerment in third world countries. Without any economic independence and productive engagement, this prototype of women consolidates the power structures of patriarchy. And for a detailed reference and analysis, you can refer back to the main text. Amitabh Ghosh's She of Poppies is our next topic. In this particular text, Ghosh talks about caste and metaphor. Ghosh actually talks about caste through the metaphor of the sea. Set in colonial India in the context of opium war with China, the text explores the issue of indentured laborers and migration to British plantation colonies. It shows a curious connection between caste and the forced migration to plantation colonies. The prospect of losing one's caste was therefore an unthinkable, for it permitted no possibility of social life outside the caste system. The crossing of the sea, the Kalapani, has remained a powerful symbol of travel across troubled waters to lands from which nobody returned home. Even if the person returns physically, he becomes non-existent for his community, as it is believed that he has lost caste. The Bengali word for caste, jat, is often synonymously used with dharma or institutional religion. The idea is traveling to the land of the other, primarily religious and racial other, which are liable to lead to the person who is indulging in forbidden habits like drinking and eating beef and also marrying someone outside one's own caste. In the text, through several examples, one will find that how women characters, they gain sexual agency in exchange of caste. But this note of regret is overpowered by the central character Diti's newfound freedom. Diti proudly introduces herself and Kalua to other Gimitiyas as chamars of the leather worker caste. The text suggests that it is only at the cost of losing her caste that Diti can gain freedom and empowerment. As an upper caste woman, she was confined to the domestic space of her home. So, loss of caste gives her the freedom of movement. Diti also assumes the leadership of Girmitiyas on the Ibis, showing characteristics of a very strong woman who had her own opinion. The text also shows that the loss of her caste identity enables Diti to exercise her sexual agency. As the bride of an upper caste household, she was both sexually exploited, being drugged and raped by her brother-in-law, and also sexually deprived since her husband, an opium addict impotent fellow. She is also pregnant by the end of the novel through her lover. The child that she expects stands for a new future where accepted boundaries of caste, class and gender would be questioned and more heterogeneous, flexible and inclusive categories of identity would be available. A final note on the cultural space of the SEEP and how it accommodates the intersection of class, caste and gender. Ghosh uses the EBs to redefine and reshuffle codes of racial, ethnic and class relationship. It brings down the Raja Zamindar to the level of his subjects, makes blue blood Europeans and Americans mingle with commoners and questions accepted gender stereotypes. or for a detailed analysis, character analysis, you can refer back to the main text. As a conclusion, we can say that in the course of this module, we have tried to argue that human identity is itself a fictional narrative that can only make sense when put into particular contexts. Identity has no essentialist value because the markers on which it is dependent are certain cultural constructs like class, caste, gender and ethnicity. Each of these categories is extremely complex, multi-layered and has no universal meaning. We have chosen a handful of texts that range from distinct geographical and cultural contexts, but all these texts, narratives taken together make the point that these categories cannot be understood in isolation. Rather, these works are interrelated, they are interrelated to each other. We have tried to show how caste, class or gender intersect in some of the New English writing. These New English literature not only invent the new possibilities of English language, robbing it of its exclusivity and elitism of being the ruler's language, but it continues to interrogate newer aspects of power relations and more implicit forms of domination and subjugation in former colonies that now come more in the forms of gender, class and class exploitation. Thank you.